Oh, I see Caroline from Rhode Island. Caroline, it's so good to see you. Thanks for saying hi on the chat. Caroline's one of my colleagues on the Opioid Response Network project, so it's good to see Caroline. And so, as we go through the webinar, as we get started, if I invite you guys to put comments in here, I'll do my best to watch it, but we're going to focus pretty much on the first 30 minutes of getting through the material and enjoying the material, not getting through it. And then we're doing something a little bit different. I'm going to post, and I'll post this again, but this is a link to a Zoom meeting afterwards. And so I kind of called this, during my time in Hawaii, we would have what's called a hui, which was a gathering of folks to share thoughts and ideas and to talk about things. And so I kind of wanted to do the material first and then invite folks to connect in a Zoom meeting, which is a little more personal than this webinar, for us to get together and talk about the material, or anybody that wants to process some of this stuff a little bit more. And again, as always, the expertise is all of us. It's all of us in the room who are doing this work out there in the field, who are adapting to incredible change right now. And so we need all of us, and so everyone's welcome. There's the link. Again, I'll post this stuff as we go through, but I'm doing some of what will come up later in terms of some recommunicating and over-communicating, so that we all can try and get the information out there. So why don't we go ahead, we'll get started, and I see additional folks logging in, but again, just want to welcome everyone. This is our Resilient Leadership webinar series, Managing and Leading Through Crisis, and really focusing on how to access resilient leadership within your own self. We're doing 3 webinars. This is part 1 of 3. They're all 30 minutes. The idea is that they give you quick information so that you can use it, apply it, and to support the important work that you're doing out there in the community. And so, to start, when we talk about resilience, we hear that word a lot, but what do we mean by it? And I think on the left side of our screen here, we see different versions of what we hear that I think are all accurate about resiliency. The ability to bounce back, the ability to establish a sense of community and connection, your ability to adapt to stress, all these things really describe what resiliency is. We're going to take a little bit of a different slant on this because these are things that we know. For a lot of us as leaders, the issue is, why can't we do it? What happens to it when we're under stress, and especially right now when we're in crisis? And what happens to those skills that are already in us that we have? And so I love the definition of resiliency in terms of its Latin root, which is to leap back. The idea is that we already have resiliency within us. We have leadership skills. And then something happens to them. We lose them. And sometimes we lose them when we need them most. So for us, our definition of resiliency is really about maintaining a skilled way of being, of presence, that we can maintain that way of being in disruption, during times of imbalance, during newness, change, and for us right now, crisis. And in that we maintain capacity to access what is already there for us, our natural gifts, our natural strengths, our higher best selves. This is not about changing who you are. This is not about you having deficits as a leader. It's about maintaining what it is that got you to a leadership position already, even when the chips are down. And so resilient leadership is to leap back, to come back, to return back to that natural strength, that natural leadership sense. And looking at crisis, looking at challenges as an opportunity for us to grow stronger through disruption and through turbulence. So the qualities of a resilient leader are really how we shift into somewhat of a positive psychology model where we see problems as opportunities, but also it's about having insight and awareness. And so resilient leaders are aware of the victim mentality trap and also the trap of blaming. We're hearing a lot of that right now, especially in our media. When you hear and when we use terminology like they, that's a good indicator that we are in that victim mentality trap and blaming mode. Resilient leaders use the word we. It's also about, we call it attitude, we call it character, we call it makeup, whatever we want to call that dynamic of who we are. It's strengths-based. It's not deficit-based. It's the cliche that it's a can attitude versus a can't. And resilient leaders also, one of their qualities is that they find their power in a time when they forgot that they have it. This is not, again, about instilling necessarily new techniques or strengths, but it's being able to build the muscle to return back to the leader that you are in the time that you need it most in times of crisis. So resilient leaders overcome difficulties versus the trap of feeling like you need to fix things or perfectly answer things. And resilient leaders learn from mistakes by demonstrating, modeling themselves as a leader that's a learner. And the vulnerability in that, the strength in that, is a model for your entire team. So I mentioned a little bit earlier to those folks that were logging in, and maybe some of you got here before, we have some resources for you that I'm going to mention. One of them, they're all available on the website. They're all there for you to download. I'm going to put them in the chat right now for you. One of these is managing crisis through leadership. And you can see that in the bottom left slide here. It's a list of all the different leadership points that we're going to go through. We're only doing 2 today. And these other 2 are on your right-hand side is the links to, hopefully these come through, is a tool called Accessing Your Resilient Leader. And we call it Accessing Your Resilient Leader because of what we're talking about, that resiliency is accessing the strengths that are already in you. And so those are some tools that you can go ahead, take a look at, download, print them out, share them with folks, whatever you find helpful to do. So I think first we have to really understand that we are in a very difficult, different time right now with COVID-19. And we're hearing a lot of things that are making our role as leaders extremely difficult. And so in the news, in our own conversations, we're hearing terminology like we're fighting an invisible enemy. And we don't know how long we're going to be managing all the things that we're managing. So there's an unknown duration. We don't even know where a potential finish line is. And we're hearing the impact of COVID-19 is widespread, worldwide. And so we are in unprecedented, uncharted territory. And so we have to acknowledge those stressors that we are under, because something happens to us that plays a really important part and role in what happens to us as leaders. And it's the shift of when we experience stress and when that stress transforms into distress. And so I'm getting some messages that maybe those links are not being sent through. So I'm going to try and send those again. I think this may work better. Maybe you guys can let me know if those come through in the chat if you could. So back to when stress becomes distress, is that stress is a normal part of our life, right? It's a thing that it's a normal response, and actually it can be really positive, right? And our natural response to stress can be physical, mental, emotional, and those are also the areas that cause tension in us or restriction. And that response to stress, it's a response to any demand that's placed on you. And the important part for us to focus on here is that that demand can be internal or external. And what I mean by internal is the thoughts that we have, the emotional experiences that we have, and the things that we tell ourselves, our internal dialogue, but also the external, the things that are going on, say, in our health center, and how those, our internal energies and our external energies certainly have a relationship that impact each other. But stress is inescapable. It's part of living life. What happens in times, especially of crisis, for leaders is that we transfer into distress. And when we experience distress, this is what happens to us. And I've been hearing a lot about this from my colleagues on conference calls and talks, and I've been experiencing it myself, that a lot of what's happening is information overload, exhaustion, and fatigue. So I've been having trouble this week concentrating. I've been forgetful. I've been a little bit critical of myself. That internal dialogue that I have has been a little bit extra harsh. So it's normal for us to feel things like an increased sense of anger, or feeling overwhelmed or immobilized, like we don't know which direction to go. I can remember earlier in the week on Monday, I came down to my desk and I kind of just sat here. I felt immobilized, like I didn't know which direction to go or what to do. We can also see in distress a self-defeating process. We start to ruminate, we worry, and that translates also into uncomfortable physical symptoms and emotional discomfort. So stomach aches, lower back pain, all those things, neck pain, those are the things that start to teach us about what's going on for us. And also emotional discomfort, feeling overwhelmed by some of those emotions. So we're feeling moody or worried or scared or irritable. We're seeing this in our colleagues, we're experiencing it ourselves. Ultimately, shifting from stress to distress places in a sense of being out of control. And when we're out of control, we end up doing things or saying things that we don't want to or that we later regret. And so the very thing we're trying to do by getting a sense of control, which is to tighten up, to get a handle, to control our feelings, to control our emotions, is actually having a paradoxical effect. And it's actually making us feel more out of control because we end up doing things and saying things that we necessarily wouldn't have done had we been in our normal, resilient leadership self. So here's the good news. This is not because you're weak. It's not your fault. This is what is part of our biology. It's the neuroscience of stress. And this is a simplified diagram of what goes on in the brain. In our best higher self, in our resilient leadership, we are making decisions out of the cerebral cortex, our prefrontal cortex. That's where we access in the brain things like abstract thinking, problem solving, our best use of language, our optimal coordination, all the good stuff that we need to make really good decisions and to lead. When we shift from stress to distress, the brain shuts that stuff off. It's trying to keep us alive. And we switch more into operating out of the limbic system, which is about strong emotions and actually leads to aggression. It's about heightening, jacking up those systems around motivation and acting out of instinct. It's really about reflective, reactive behaviors. And in that is an increase in our blood pressure, our pulse. We see these shifts in our body become more rigid, all the negative things that happen to us physically and biochemically when we're under that kind of distress. And so you may have heard the metaphor of the elephant and the rider. Jonathan Haid's explanation, it's a beautiful metaphor. Dan Heath did a lot of work around this, around how that cerebral cortex is the rider on the elephant. And that limbic system is this big, powerful elephant that moves the rider. And under distress, those two get separated. And it's the elephant that runs wild. And so I saw this great text the other day from Dr. Hallian on Twitter. She's a psychologist at the University of Pittsburgh. And this really hit home for what was going on for me. She said, hey, you can't concentrate on work. That's normal. Our brains pay attention to things that are scary. What she's saying is that this is how we're alive. This is how we're wired. However, we can become aware of this. So if you can't concentrate, forcing yourself to try harder and buckling down, that's not going to work. So she says, let it go. Well, I think letting go is one of the hardest things to do in life, but we're going to talk about some ways that maybe we can get at and get into letting go. So for us as resilient leaders, awareness is our key. It's not the key. It's a key that opens up to many other doors and resources for us. And I love this quote by Viktor Frankl. He says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And it's in that space we find our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. We're going to explore how we can identify those stimulus, our response to that stimulus, and get into that space in between. So we can access, in times of stress, this is where we lose it, our power to make choice. This is the seat of control that we're looking for. And ironically, the way we get at that control is through some processes of surrendering. So let's look at one of the ways that we can get into that space. And so I'm going to invite all of us, in whatever way is most comfortable for you, to access that space between stimulus and response. And it's right here. You can do it a number of different ways, and mindful practices are some of the best. You can allow yourself to lose yourself in this beautiful, beautiful picture of these amazing trees and find all the different textures and leaves and types, or focus in for just a second on the different colors that you see. Or you can join me in some diaphragmatic breathing. And we're just going to take a minute to do this, but we're going to experience the shift that it can have on how we're feeling and what we're doing. So I'm going to invite you, if you want to keep your eyes open or to keep your eyes closed, to join me. And all we're going to do is take 3 deep breaths, and we're going to focus our mind's eye, our awareness, that awareness, onto our breath. And if you notice your breath right now, it may be a little uncomfortable because you've just taken an unconscious process, breathing, something you weren't thinking about before, and you've made it conscious. You've become aware. And it's been happening the whole time, but now we are aware, and we are more grounded and centered in that. And I'm a little out of breath because I took my breath back, so I'm going to grab a breath. And now I'm going to focus on breathing my breath in with my mind focused on it for 3 seconds in and 3 to 4 seconds out. And I'm going to do that 3 times in a row. I'm going to invite you to join me. And you can close your eyes or not. I like to close my eyes. So breathing in, 3, 4, and then breathing out, 3, 4. And allowing yourself to breathe in, 2, 3, 4, and then breathing out, 3, 4, and then one more time in, 3, 4, and then breathing out, 3, 4, and I'm going to do one more. And now I'm going to come back. And so in just that 30 to 40 seconds that we took of looking at the trees or practicing that breathing exercise, I really feel a little bit more calm, and I feel a little bit more relaxed and a little bit more grounded. And that's an exercise that we can use to help us start to bring the balance back to accessing our resilient leader and breaking out of distress and moving back into balance and regulation. So our first tip for accessing our resilient leaders is balance before action. In times of stress, before we make a decision, before we do something, maybe even before we say something to another employee in the hallway, is that we pause, we stop. And balance before action is the opposite of staying calm. The idea of staying calm is that if we could stay calm, we would just do it. And being told to stay calm or telling others to stay calm is not helpful. Instead, using your awareness, and we're going to go through that awareness, to check in. What am I thinking? What am I feeling? What am I experiencing? It's okay to not feel calm. What the danger is when we're not feeling calm and we're not aware of it. So determine through your awareness if you're dysregulated, and then pick an action that brings you closer to your balanced self. Maybe use a breathing exercise, maybe use a body scan, room awareness, taking a walk, connecting with a colleague. You make the call on whatever it is that you think might work for you. The action of no action is a very important action, that it puts back online your brain to access the creativity, your problem solving, your abstract thinking. You don't want to move on without it. So how do you access it? Well, again, you can get this tool off the website. We have a tool, but it's the idea of how do we get between stimulus and response. It's between mind, body, and action. And connecting with those things and the parallel process of what I'm thinking in my own mind, what I'm experiencing in my body, and also what's going on in my environment. I have a picture here of a health center. We know that those two energies vibrate off each other in a wonderful way. And so if the health center is dysregulated and there's a lot of energy, that's going to impact me as a leader. But also so too, the way I walk into my health center and my energy is going to impact the energy in my environment. So we're getting into that space of control of those energies in the mind, the body, and then looking at how we act. So our three keys to accessing that resiliency in the mind is to say, hey, what am I talking to myself about? Is this a healthy message? Is it real? Is it fact? Is it fiction? Am I in the future? Am I in the past? What is it that I'm telling myself? And then a great way also to understand where we're at that is superior to the mind is the body. The body knows best. What am I experiencing? What am I feeling in my body? Where am I experiencing it? Are my shoulders tight? Is my jaw clenched? Does my stomach hurt? Doing a body scan in that same way you used your awareness to check in on your breath, scan your body. Find your tension points. It will tell you what you're feeling better than your mind will. And then look at your actions. What are you doing? How fast are you walking? How fast are you talking? What is your tone? How are you speaking to employees? How do you look? These are all indicators for us to find the awareness of where we are as leaders. And so now, number two, through our awareness, we found that space. Now we're going to hold the space. The idea of holding space for us as leaders is that we don't need to have all the answers or the best answer. And it's also okay for our employees to experience things. It's okay for our employees to experience anxiety, for them to be fearful, for them to be rigid or stuck. It's not our job as a leader to take those feelings away or to even fix that stuff. And here's the catch. You know this, but we forget it when we're in a leadership role because a lot of times we're alone and everyone's looking to us, but we can't fix that stuff anyway. And leaders fall into this trap of trying to fix and take this stuff away. Remember, between stimulus and response and what we do is a space, and that space is a healing space. So we can hold that space by making a commitment to give your team space to experience what it is that's going on for them in their minds, emotionally, in their bodies, or in their actions, this allows that to become aware for them. They can hold those feelings, talk about them, process them, and this is what helps them get regulated. This brings your teams back into that prefrontal cortex, that wonderful thinking part of their brain that's getting shut off for them. As resilient leaders, we do it first, bring that space and create that space for our teams to do the very thing that we did internally for ourselves. Our teams start to enter more balanced states of emotional congruency. They become with what it is that they are, and then we can use our coping skills to address what it is that we need. By letting go of that perceived control, that we can control all these things, we actually empower our teams. So what you did in step one of becoming aware, of taking that pause, of being in that space, you're now creating for your teams. You're doing it for them. And this is a commitment. It's a commitment. It takes guts and it takes strength, but go for it. Because in this space is where your teams will find regulation. So how do we, and so this is step one and step two of our 6 steps into emotional, resilient leadership. And we have to mention, how do we support, how do we enhance our resiliency? And the idea is all this stuff on the left, and I know that you know it. I know that you're aware of it. It's about self-care, it's about getting sleep, but why don't we do it? And why don't we do it in times of stress? The reason is because it takes a commitment. It takes a commitment to do these things. It's an investment. It doesn't just come to us. It comes from within us. It means taking more energy of resources that we may feel we don't have. But here's the benefit of making the commitment to doing this stuff on the left for us. You get an exponential reward back. The energy of one that you put into any one of these self-care tactics on the left that fit best for you equals another one. But 1 + 1 in this area equals 3. We get more out of it. And I know we know this, but it's a reminder to do it, to make a commitment. And how do we do that? By setting schedule, making a commitment to ourselves, setting goals, externalizing these things on the left into maybe a piece of paper so that it becomes real in the world and we can act out on it, putting it in our calendars, reminding our colleagues to remind us that we can do it in partnership and in tandem. That's how we get these things done, because now more than ever, we need these supports to enhance our resiliency as leaders. So we're coming up on our time. It's just short of 2 o'clock. I want to invite everybody to our HUI, our gathering afterwards, where I'm going to hang out for half an hour, and folks that want to talk more about this or share your real world experiences of what's going on in your health centers, in your places of work around managing all that we are up against right now. Please feel free to join us. I'm going to be opening that up in just a second. A reminder, part 2, we're going to get into structure and feedback around resilient leaders. And then part 3 is wrapping up in communication and being flexibly directive, giving direction as a resilient leader. We also have a webinar at the end of the month for behavioral health providers who are working with chronic health conditions. I want to wrap up here and just say that no matter what is happening, no matter what's going on, it's a reminder to know that your ability to be a resilient leader is always right here with you. It's these steps that are going to help you get back to exactly who it is that you are and that your teams need. So I'm going to go ahead and put our link to the HUI, as I call it, and we'll go ahead and meet up in the follow-up room afterwards. And again, if anyone has any questions or wants to connect with me, please don't hesitate to reach out. You guys can get have my contact information. We're also going to post a link to the slide deck and a recording of this webinar. So again, in this time, this is really from all of us at NSI Strategies, my team here. just something that we tried to do to support you all in the incredible work that you're doing out there on the front lines. A day or a minute doesn't seem to go by where I'm not thinking of all of you out there. It's very serious, critical work that you're doing, and you're all putting yourselves on the front lines to take care of your community, sometimes even in front of taking care of your own families and yourselves. And so it's with great respect and honor that we do this work to just try and support what you're doing out there. And if any one of us at NSI Strategies, myself, or anyone on our team can be of assistance to you, we want you to reach out to us. We're doing what we can from here to support you out there. So thank you.